have you guys here. This is the 6th session of the series that we're going through, the Throne Room of God, and we're as you guys have been following along, and we've been going through Revelation 4 and 5. Okay, in this session we're going to look at Revelation 4 verse 2. In the previous 2 sessions we looked at Revelation chapter 4 verse 3. Okay, and we looked at the 3 gemstones, the jasper, carnelian, and emerald rainbow surrounding God, and how those 3 gemstones speak of the nature of God. Okay, and we looked at that in the last 2 sessions, and I want to do Revelation 4:3 before verse 2 because I wanted to connect the gemstones, and primarily the sardius or carnelian stone, the burning nature of God, with the 3rd session of God's nature as Trinity, because I really wanted to hammer home how God is burning with desire for His own glory, and the members of the Trinity are burning with desire for the glorification of each other. Okay, now we're going to look at and hone in on verse 2 on God's throne, and we're going to focus the next 3 sessions on the throne of God. Okay, and we could talk a lot more about the throne of God, but we're doing this little mini series in the midst of the throne room on His throne. Okay, now when you look biblically at the throne of God, it's almost as if God isn't seated on the same throne, that He's seated on different thrones. Okay, even in the book of Revelation. Okay, in Revelation chapter 4, John sees God, and He's on this ruling and He's on this reigning throne. Okay, and then in Revelation chapter 20, He's on this white throne of judgment. Okay, and John doesn't really try and bring the 2 thrones together, but rather just saying that there's this ruling throne and that there's this throne. It's almost as if there's 2 different thrones in the book of Revelation. As we look in the next 3 sessions, this session, the next 2 sessions, at God's throne, what we're going to see is it's almost as if God is seated on different thrones. Okay, now what I believe, as I've really looked into this and studied it, is that it's more that God is seated on one throne that has multiple functions. Okay, and so John, in Revelation 4, he sees the ruling throne. Revelation 20, he sees this throne of judgment, this white throne of judgment and purity. Ezekiel sees this, he sees from this angle, he sees this sapphire, beautiful throne. And Daniel looks at the throne from this angle, and he sees this throne with wheels on it, which theologians refer to as the chariot throne of God. Okay, I think it's the same throne, and the different prophets or individuals having these visions are seeing it, the same throne, from these different vantage points. Okay, but we could also say that that God is seated on, He has different thrones for different functions. Okay, now there are 7 main thrones in the scriptures that God is said to be seated upon. Okay, and these thrones have their functions and have purposes to which God, or for which God is seated on them. Okay, the first is His ruling throne or His reigning throne. We're going to look at that in this session here. We're going to focus on that in this session. It's the most commonly referred to in the scriptures as His reigning throne. The second is what we talked about in Revelation 20, okay, His throne of judgment. And we're going to look at Revelation 20 next week, okay, and we're going to focus in on the throne of judgment that God is seated upon, which is also referred to as the judgment seat of God, or the judgment seat of Christ by Paul. Okay, the third, and what we're going to look at in the 3rd session, 2 more sessions after this, is the chariot throne of God, like I made mention to already in Daniel chapter 7, that His throne has wheels, which speaks of a throne of mobility. Okay, and that's a very common title for the throne of Daniel chapter 7, by theologians as a chariot throne. Okay, and we're going to really look at that in a lot more detail. The fourth is the sapphire throne, Ezekiel chapter 1. He sees a sapphire throne. Okay, the fifth is his cherub throne. Okay, and it's that he is enthroned upon or above the cherubim. Okay, living angelic beings, he is enthroned above and over them, or over them. And when we look in the latter session of the chariot throne, I'm going to really blend those three thrones together. The chariot throne, the sapphire throne, and the cherub throne. I believe that they're really speaking of one reality, and that's why I really think that he's seated on the same throne, but with multiple different functions to it. Okay, the sixth throne is the Ark of the Covenant. Twice in Scripture, God is referred to as being enthroned upon the Ark. Now, and if I wanted to, I would add that on to the chariot throne session, because I really think that really speaks of the same reality as the chariot, sapphire, and cherub throne. But because I don't want to make that session an hour to an hour and a half, I'm not going to do that. The seventh throne is the messianic throne, the throne of Christ. Okay, and this is the throne that is referred to in the Old Testament prophecies about the Messiah, which is referred to most often as the throne of David. It's said to be at the right hand of the Father. Okay, it's twice in the book of Matthew. It's referred to as the throne of glory, which is my favorite title for it. But the emphasis in all the prophecies about the messianic throne is its internality, that it is eternal. Okay, that Jesus Christ as a human being is seated on this very throne right now in heaven at the right hand of God, and that throne will one day, that throne of glory will be established on this very earth. Okay, Christ isn't coming to take the bride away from the earth. Okay, any end time perspective you have, this is concrete. Christ is coming to rule and reign on the earth as a human being, and he will establish his throne of glory over all the nations of the earth. And all the nations will come and worship King Jesus forever. It is an eternal throne that a human being, a man, will sit on from the lineage of David. That's the messianic throne. Okay? Now these are 7 thrones that the Bible really speaks of. And I said that they have function and purpose. And I really want to emphasize that, because there are other descriptions of his throne. In Psalm 22 it says that God is enthroned upon his people, or the praises of his people. And that's more of a description than speaking of his throne having function or purpose to it. Jeremiah chapter 3 says speaks of his throne being the throne of Jerusalem. Okay, Hebrews chapter 4 says that he is seated upon a throne of grace, or the throne of grace. And I think it's about 10 times in Scripture that his throne is referred to as heaven itself. And again, that's a description speaking of where his throne is, not actually heaven being his very throne. And so those are more descriptive language that describes the throne. Okay, but the first 7 speak of more thrones of function and purpose, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Like I said, the title of this session is The Reigning Throne. And this is the most talked about throne in all the scriptures. From my studies in the ESV, it's used over 50 times in the entire Bible. And the very interesting thing about this throne is it's referred to 28 times in the book of Revelation alone. Okay, the book of Revelation is unique for so many reasons. It's unique and different from other books. I mean, one, its usage of the number 7 in the book, but another is its usage of the word throne or thrones in the book, and specifically speaking of the reigning throne of God. Now, when we come to Revelation chapter 4, verse 2, where John says, "At once I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne stood in heaven with one seated on the throne." Okay, now John is using very specific language here. Okay, why does he say the throne first before him who is seated on it second? And him who is seated on it second. Why would he do that? Because he's wanting to emphasize the sovereignty and the reign of God. Because here's the thing, the book of Revelation was written to the New Testament church that was in the midst of persecution. Okay, I believe the book of Revelation was written 90 AD to the church that was going through persecution. Okay, regardless if you believe it was written in 70 AD, if he was written in 70 AD, he was preparing the church for persecution. Okay, regardless of whatever viewpoint you have. In 70 AD, the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem took place, and that marked a time period of massive, brutal, intense persecution on the New Testament church. All right? Now, God is wanting, first and foremost, for the believers in the New Testament church to understand, in the midst of the chaos happening, in the midst of the persecution, imprisonments, beatings, killings, okay, God is on his throne. God is ruling, and he is establishing his plans and purposes regardless of how chaotic things are. He's wanting the church to understand that he is ruling and he is reigning and he is still accomplishing his purpose regardless of how situations are looking like in the earth. Now, I want to ask a philosophical question. What gives God the right to reign? What gives God the right to sit on this ruling and reigning throne? The answer is because he's the creator. Okay, as the creator, by virtue of you being the creator, you are then the ruler of that creation. Okay, here's an analogy. Let's say I paint a picture. Okay, well, I mean, I'm not an artist, so let's think of something. Because if I paint something, it would look terrible. If some artist painted a picture, regardless of how beautiful or how terrible it is, that is his creation. Okay, he can do whatever he wants with it. He can hang it up on a wall. He can put it away in storage. He can burn the thing, and nobody can say to him, "What on earth are you doing?" He has the right to do whatever he wants with that painting because he's the creator of it. And God has the right to do whatever he wants. He can burn the earth. He can flood the earth. He can extend love and mercy to the earth. He can do whatever he wants by virtue of him being creator. And he is the one ruling and reigning, and he is the only one ruling and reigning over his creation, and he is the only one who can say whatever he wants and makes whatever decrees he wants on morality or whatever, because he is the creator and he is seated on that throne. Now, this is a throne of sovereignty. Okay, this is a throne of government. And this throne is governing over absolutely everything in creation. Okay, this throne is ruling over the cosmos and everything in it. This throne is ruling over the earth and all the activities in it. This throne is ruling over all the laws of physics. Okay, from this throne, God is commanding everything that he is wanting and desiring. Okay, he is governing and he is commanding the gravitational pulls within our atmosphere, the positioning of planets and stars and galaxies and our cosmos. Okay, guys, from the most minuscule thing to the most gigantic of things is ruled and reigned over from the place of this throne. Okay, when you walk outside tomorrow and a little breeze comes across your face, that breeze is coming from the command of this throne. It is inescapable. The leaf that's going to fall down in some jungle in Africa tomorrow that nobody will ever see is falling from the authority of this throne. It is inescapable, and it is ruling over absolutely everything on this earth and in this cosmos and everything that is defined as God's creation. I mean, guys, demonic powers submit to this throne. Okay, demonic beings and cosmic powers, they break before the throne. They have nothing before, they shatter like crystal before him. The demonic powers, they can't do anything without the approval of God on his throne. Okay, military leaders and the world leaders of the earth, kings and governmental leaders, those who think that they got power because they got some big military behind them, or nuclear weapons. These military leaders of the earth are only puppets in the eyes of God. And he's just making them do whatever he's wanting. I mean, even in Revelation chapter 20, it says that God is going to put his intentions and his purposes in the heart of the Antichrist, and he's going to bring about the purposes of God on the earth. The Antichrist is going to do that. How much more is God going to do and accomplish his plans and purposes with the leadership of the earth now, with the kings of the earth now in this time? Oh, beloved, he is ruling and reigning over all the nations of the earth beautifully, perfectly, and sovereignly. And here's the reality. He is working everything on a national level to an individual level. In your life and my life, he's working everything together according to Ephesians chapter 1, verse 11. According to the counsel of his will. Because here's the reality. Okay? Everything, every single will in the cosmos and on the earth, in my life, in my mom's life, in everyone's life, on a national level, on a personal level, is going towards this one end. The singular and only will of him who is seated on the throne in heaven. And get caught up in that reality. Okay, that offends me profoundly at times in my life, that this whole story going on is not about my own will, but rather this is about the will of one person that is to dominate absolutely everything. Even Jesus himself said, my will is to do the will of the Father, of him who sent me. Okay, the goal of being a Christian is not to validate or to fight for the fact that we have free will, or to vindicate our right in things in life or over things in life, but rather is to fight for and to wrestle for the losing of our will and it being swallowed up in the will of the Father, the will of the one who is on his throne. Everything is going towards this one will, and everything is going towards this one man's desire. Now, when we really think and ponder this throne, okay, this ruling and reigning throne, it invokes two responses in our hearts. The first, it invokes a response of comfort. Okay, like when life throws this at you and that at you, and life just seems out of control. One, it's comforting to understand and know God's on his throne. That's good. It brings a sense of peace in our lives, right? When we can't control life, at least God is in control. So for one, it provokes a response of comfort. And the second response is a heart of offense. Say offense. As we look at this, you're going to realize how easy it is to be offended by this throne. Because when we realize God is reigning over everything in our lives, we don't just realize that he's reigning over the good things in our lives. He's reigning over the negative things in our lives as well. When we really consider that, then we ask the question, how could God allow ... How could God allow this person coming into my life? How could God allow this relational conflict between me and this person? How could God remove this person from my life? Okay, how could God be reigning over the removal of my job, or the fact that I didn't get that promotion? That's offensive. That is profoundly offensive to our hearts. Now, I don't believe, and I'm not saying, that God is initiating these things. Rather, I'm saying God is ruling over them. Now, I do think God has the authority and does and can do negative things in our lives to wake us up and to shake us to a place of repentance. Because he'll do anything and everything in his mercy to shake us up and to bring him to himself. Okay, but he is ruling over everything. And this is it's almost just as offensive to consider that God would initiate a negative thing. It's almost equally offensive to that he is allowing a negative thing to take place. Now, if there's ever a time where we need to heed the words of Christ in Luke chapter 7, verse 23, it's now, guys, where Jesus says, "Blessed is the one who is not offended by me." An odd scripture verse, right? Blessed is the one who's not offended by me. Because here's the reality. The leadership of Christ is incredibly offensive. Let's just look at Luke chapter 7. John the Baptist is in prison. He's about to be beheaded. He sends his disciples to Jesus with a question saying, "Are you the Messiah, or are we to wait for another?" And Jesus' response is he basically says yes by quoting a bunch of scriptures in Isaiah, and then he tags the statement on at the end. Blessed is the one who is not offended by me. Blessed is the one who is not offended by my rule in my kingdom, in my government. Because you guys are waiting for a Messiah to come, a political Messiah to overcome Rome. But here's the thing, guys. It's not going to look like what you think it's going to look like. And it's not going to look like what you think it's going to look like for John the Baptist. Because he's sitting in prison. And here's the reality. This is so offensive when you look at Luke chapter 7. Jesus is over here. He's got flourishing ministry over here. Okay? John the Baptist is over here. And he's about to be beheaded. Jesus has all the power and authority to go and free John the Baptist. But he doesn't. That is incredibly offensive because John gets beheaded. Now, did Jesus kill John the Baptist? Absolutely not. But he allowed it to happen. When you look at that circumstance, you're like, well, where's the wisdom in that? And we have to sit down and trust in the reality that his ways are higher and above our ways. Now, when Jesus says, "Blessed is the one who's not offended by me," I don't think Jesus is saying you'll never be offended, or better is the one who's never offended. But rather he's saying, blessed is the one who overcomes his offense. And the way we overcome our offense is a greater trust in the wisdom of God, where we don't understand what is going on in our lives. That we know and can trust that God is wise in his doings and his dealings with our lives. Okay, but if we sit down and we allow this offense to grow in our hearts when thinking about the government of God and the rule of Christ in our lives, when we let that offense grow, that will provoke two things in us. It will grow into a bitterness, and two responses will take place, or it will come to two ends. One, it will come to the end of removing God from the situation. This offends me that God would allow this to happen. Therefore, I'm going to take God away from the equation, and I'm going to take him, almost as if we could say, off of his throne, and just remove him altogether from this equation so I don't have to deal with this offense. It's the denial that God is actually on his throne. And there has never been a time, guys, where this is so evidently seen in the midst of 2021 with COVID-19 happening. Okay, in March of 2020, COVID came into North America, and I was astonished at the amount of big deal ministry leaders and big deal ministries that made public statements on social media saying that God has nothing to do with COVID-19, that this is not God's will. And okay, well, I'm not saying God initiated COVID-19. I'm saying God is reigning over COVID-19. Okay, to take God out of the equation of COVID-19 is absolute blasphemy. He is sovereign over COVID-19. He has a plan in the midst of COVID-19, and he is ruling over it, and he is orchestrating the nations of the earth according to his will, and he is accomplishing all that he desires in COVID-19. Okay, guys, he is ruling and he is reigning over this virus and over the effects of this virus with mental health and with economic collapses happening on personal levels and on national levels, he is ruling because he has a plan in the midst of it, guys. Okay, now just on this topic of COVID-19, I just want to say this here because I know so many Christians who are really obsessing over conspiracy YouTube videos. They're just sitting in their basement thinking that they're adding to their spiritual life by just binge watching and being entertained by conspiracy theories on YouTube. Okay, and in this hour, I believe the Holy Spirit is calling the church out of conspiracy theories and binge watching dumb videos about man's views and theories about what's going on in the earth today. And he's wanting us to get caught up into the true conspiracy of this hour. The conspiracy, not that is this government planning this, or is this government got hand in COVID, or is this a collaborated thing, or whatever. Go beyond this elementary idea of conspiracy, okay? Go through Revelation 4:1, the open door, and go up and get caught up into the true conspiracy, the mature conspiracy, that there is a government that has its hand in COVID-19, that there's a government that is actually planning and orchestrating something in the midst of COVID-19, and it's not the government of Canada, it's not the government of China, it's the government of heaven, and King Jesus is doing something in the midst of COVID-19. Okay, God's calling you out of this room of dumb conspiracy theories and get caught up into the conspiracy of the Bible. Get caught up in the eschatological end-time scriptures and study them and meditate on the nature of God in the midst of this time and in this hour. Give yourself to worship and intercession. More than just binge watching on dumb videos, give yourself to the conspiracy that is happening. That's not a theory, but it's a conspiracy that's a fact that heaven is ruling in this day and hour. Now, coming back to this, and if we let this offense grow, one, it will create a bitterness in us where we will dethrone God and remove Him from the equation altogether, or this bitterness will grow to the place where we will deny Christ outright. And those are the only two ends where this offense grows if we do not conquer this offense. Now, like I said, we conquer this offense by growing in trust of God's profound wisdom. Okay, like I said in the first session, we are to heed this invitation of Revelation 4:1. Come up here through the open door. Why? Because God is wanting to show us, personally and corporately, the things that He's about to do on the earth. And the things that are about to take place. Not just eschatologically in the end times, not just in this time, future time, but also what He is doing here and now, and to come up to His throne room and to get His perspective on the situations and the affairs of the earth. Okay, it's almost like we're viewing things in our lives from the street level view, where we can't see past the car because it's on the same level as us, right? We can't really see what's going on beyond that house. We're viewing things from this horizontal street level view. And God is wanting us to come up to a high-rise view and to look down upon the affairs of the earth and the things and the situations of our lives from His perspective. He's wanting to give us a greater perspective than our horizontal street level view. And we are to come up to His throne room. And we are to fall down before the Ancient of Days and worship Him. As we trust in Him and we trust in His plans and purposes, that His ways are higher than our ways, we can fall down and just adore Him, knowing that He is doing perfect and beautiful things in our lives. Because here's the reality. Daniel calls Him the Ancient of Days. Okay, he describes Him as having hair white like wool. Okay, and that is speaking symbolically of His wisdom that He has. And He calls Him the Ancient of Days. Why? Because He's the Ancient One. Okay, for the last thousands of years, God has sat on His throne and He has observed humanity. Millennium after millennium after millennium. He knows exactly what it takes to make a man fail in His kingdom, and He knows exactly what it takes to make a man great in His kingdom. Okay, He has studied humanity extensively. Okay, but his study goes beyond just observing humanity to the place of actual personal experience and personal knowledge, because we know the second person of the Trinity became a human being and was incarnated as Christ himself, as the man Jesus. And he walked as a man, and he suffered as a man more than anyone, or not anyone, but most people in North America. He suffered ridicule and a gruesome death on a cross. He suffered temptations according to Hebrews chapter 2 and Hebrews chapter 4. Okay, he has this one who is seated on the throne. Not only has he just observed humanity, and he's observed humanity far more than you've observed humanity in your, however many years you've been on the earth, thinking that you have wisdom on mankind. Think about the God who's observed thousands of years of man. Do you think he knows what it takes to make you great? Do you think he doesn't really know what he's doing? That if he's giving you too much to handle? No, he knows exactly what to give you. He knows exactly what to do in your life. And he has a personal experience. Guys, this is the reality. We have to overcome this offense in our hearts by the trust that by trusting that this one on that throne is exceedingly wisdom, and everything that he's doing in our lives is flowing from this ocean of knowledge that he possesses. Regardless of how chaotic your life may be, okay, maybe you're in the valley low or you're in the mountaintop experience right now in life. The invitation is the same. We need to go up to his throne room and get his perspective. And we need to trust in his wisdom. Regardless of how out of place things may be in your life right now. Romans chapter 8 verse 28. He is working every single thing together in your life for your good. And he is working it together for your good to conform you into the image of his Son. So I want to encourage you, trust in his wisdom and fall down before him and worship him as the Ancient of Days.